Thanks, Suzanne.
So, hello again. My name is Suzanna Kalendzhian. I thought my probably family name was too hard to pronounce. I'm half Armenian, half Ukrainian. I founded a legal tech startup, and we are the only one and first legal services marketplace in the region.
My name is Marc Norman, and I'm from Covington and Burling. It's a DC headquartered law firm. I actually come to blockchain from a renewable energy and project finance angle. I have for the last 8 years advised mainly IPP developers, energy companies on developing and financing renewable energy projects. And as Abe just alluded to earlier when he asked his questions, now blockchain is potentially going to have a dramatic effect on distributed energy, and at the moment we're seeing developments through companies such as Abe's in distributed solar and microgrids. So I've been looking quite heavily at that and working with a number of energy companies in harnessing the power of blockchain, but also more widely as a firm, we're a very, very large regulatory and policy outfit, so helping either large corporates to influence governments in how governments are going to regulate blockchain, cryptocurrencies and ICOs, or otherwise also helping governments to formulate their future policies in various countries around the world.
Thank you.
Ian Luthringer, we've already met.
Hi, Irina Heaver. I'm a partner in a local law firm. I look after the commercial and technology partners, commercial and technology law and commercial and technology clients. We are currently looking at a couple of ICO projects by private companies. We're also looking at one ICO project by a governmental owned entity in the GCC. That's probably as much as I can say at the moment. We are exploring how the UAE regulatory system can allow for an ICO and for blockchain-based companies, and it's, as you will learn later on, it's as boring as you can imagine and as complicated as we have not imagined. And it's great to be here and great to meet all of you.
Well, thank you so much. This is great that actually we have two UAE-based lawyer, right?
I'm a formal lawyer, but now it's a more legal tech and all these trendy words like...
Perfect, but you're local,
blockchain.
right?
Yeah.
And you're local too, and we have a US and UAE too. Well, then we're going to have three different perspectives of UAE and one bias perspective of US, so nobody's going to challenge you yet. So if we can take a look at the general regulatory environment right now, the current one, what would be the status in UAE? I know Abu Dhabi has been very open. The government of Dubai has been very open in terms of accepting blockchain and accepting the ICOs. And there's actually a blockchain committee at the Dubai Foundation, Future Foundation. If you can elaborate, perhaps for 2 minutes.
So blockchain is one thing, ICO is something else.
Right.
So when blockchain is the technology part, and lots of companies are looking into adopting it, which is fine, it's fantastic, and the company itself is existing and is regulated under its relevant authority. But when we're talking about ICO, it's a financial product, at least that's what authorities are seeing it here. And financial services and financial products, strictly regulated, and for a very good reason. I know you would not agree with me, but protecting mums and pops, investing their last $50 from their bank account. The problem with the UAE, we're a 9 million people population, and only about 2 million of us have an income over $1,500 a month. So basically, those who can invest in an ICO. Very small market. We have 5 regulatory authorities in the UAE. 3 at the federal level, 1 DIFC, which is a financial free zone in Dubai, and 1 financial free zone here in ADGM, here in Abu Dhabi. And one of the speakers mentioned that some of his friends and family are now dealing with the government of Abu Dhabi for an ICO, which I think is a little bit misleading. Probably what meant is the ADGM free zone. So what we have the 5 regulators, all fine and great. The main one is the central bank, and the central bank is giving more and more authority away to to an entity called ESCA, Emirate Security and Commodities Authority, who issued several very interesting pieces of legislation. You can read it before bedtime. It will send you to bed immediately. So Central Bank itself issued a regulation in January this year prohibiting any cryptocurrency manipulations and any activities dealt with that. Then a month later, the governor of the central bank came out saying, no, I did not mean that. Bitcoin is not covered. Calm down. Stop panicking. The law is there. The governor of central bank clarified that it's not, that the Bitcoin is not covered. So I actually do not know what the status is, because there's no legal precedent. There's no court precedent on the subject matter. Also, the central bank came out and the local chamber of commerce came out in every emirate warning against investing in cryptocurrencies and warning against investing in Bitcoin, specifically saying it's all a scam, don't touch it, keep your savings in our banks with 0% interest, and because this is how you're going to be safe, and don't worry about the 15% inflation year on year. It's all great, all fantastic. And of course, ADGM, as we learned, issued ICO regulations. The regulations actually just open a slight door to allow for ICOs if it is a security. If it is a utility token, you can do whatever you want. We have no interest in that. Now, again, the federal authority issues a regulation prohibiting marketing of any security which is not registered with them. So you decide to do an ICO with ADGM, but you cannot market it. You can call all your friends and family, as as Ian mentioned before. But then, what do you do with that? You can't market it. Right. It's illegal. It's prohibited. And the sanctions. You don't want to know what the local sanctions are. They're not fun. So where does it leave us? It leaves us in a very UAE. It leaves us in a very interesting position. And 48 hours ago, I would be sitting. If we were 48 hours ago, I'd be sitting here on the stage saying, UAE should be on the same level as Switzerland and on the same level as Singapore, allowing for the ICOs to happen, allowing for this capital to come. But literally 48 hours ago, less than 48 hours ago, UAE was blacklisted as a tax haven by EU. What does that mean for the UAE? What does it mean for DIFC banks? What does it mean for ADGM financial institutions? I don't know. I can only speculate because I know what happened with jurisdictions that got blacklisted in the past, like Panama. So I can only speculate what will happen with UAE. Of course, the leadership of UAE, I'm sure, will take all the necessary steps to get that remedied, but we are yet to see that. We are yet to see what's going to happen. So to answer your question, what's happening in the UAE? A lot of things are happening from the regulators. The regulators are very interested.
They don't know what to do with it.
They don't know what to do with that. Yeah. They're not prohibiting it expressly, but they are coming out to warn each individual investor not to get involved.
But they just want to be with the flow of the other countries that have been, involved in speaking out about the regulations and so forth.
I mean, will we go the way China went, prohibiting it, completely banning it? Will we go the way Russia is going, trying to bring it under their realm and trying to regulate it?
We'll get back to that one.
Or
yes.
what US is doing, similar. So, I mean, it's may you live in interesting times. That's the Chinese curse, and I think we're living in very interesting times here in the UAE, especially considering what happened 48 hours ago, which is of great concern to a lot of EU-based EU headquarters companies that are based here in the UAE.
So what do you think, Suzanna? I'll get back to Ian regarding all these changes in UAE. And
I'm biased. I'm really a big fan of Dubai and the UAE in general. And I can say that, for example, ADGM done a good job, amazing job, putting the UAE in general in the map, saying like, yes, we know what it is, and we actually attracting the startups in. Another story is how it's going to evolve and what's going to happen next and how we are going to deal with it. As Irina mentioned, now it's like the only addendum, only added on to the main financial regulatory that just released recently in October. And it's giving the opportunity for fintech startups and for those who actually know something about blockchain to come in and teach them. This is how, in general, the history of the UAE were done before. So the experts will come in here, they were put on the really high level positions, and they were studying the country and they were building the country with the knowledge that they have from, their countries. The same story gonna happen with this, I feel. And I know that we are just in the beginning, but again, probably when we're studying anything, we don't know, but then you learn. And they will make a lot of mistakes. But with the vision, which is the most important, I feel, like living in this country in the middle of the desert with all these buildings and stuff, there is a vision behind that. So probably there's going to be I see the good light in the end of the tunnel. Okay. We just need some time for it.
Yeah.
And I'll maybe just add a little thing about Dubai. I think if you look at the way that Dubai has evolved in the last few years with the smart city kind of concept, whether it's renewable energy, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, smart contracts, all these sort of things. I mean, it's become a really, really sort of big focus point for the government of Dubai. And as the government of Dubai has shown, they tend to really, put their words into action. So I'm pretty bullish actually about how blockchain and generally the fintech sort of ecosystem will develop in the Emirate of Dubai. I think it's great that the ADGM has actually surprised the market, gone a step further, and actually provided some regulatory clarity, which is great. And actually, there may be, we may actually benefit in the UAE from some healthy competition between the IFC on one hand and ADGM on the other, and maybe play off each other to try and give us, even more development.
Thank you.
Well,
there we go.
First I'll say I'm not anti-regulation. I'm anti-appropriation oppression.
Right.
And the U.S. is currently trying to fit the blockchain industry into a box that it doesn't fit in. They're trying to make it fall in line with the Securities Exchange Act of 1933, the Commodities Exchange Act, Investment Company Act, so on and so forth. Right now, the SEC, again, is giving us the Howey test, is the threshold question to determine whether it's a security. If it is, you're supposed to register it. The CFTC has come in and said, hey, it's a commodity. So now we have two opposing views. The CFTC says it's a commodity. Therefore, if you're going to offer an exchange where you're offering futures, calls, puts, shorts, you have to register with the CFTC, and you have to jump through all those hoops. FinCEN has come in, that's the Financial Crimes Network, and said you're a money service business if you allow somebody to purchase any kind of cryptocurrency for US dollars. So if you change fiat currency for crypto, you're now money service business, you need to register with them. That, by the way, is every single state that you do that with, you need to register. They are working right now on a national charter, so you only have to apply for the national charter, and that'll allow you to issue in every state. But the US is confused because at the end of the day, this is all. It's a commodity, it's a currency, it's a unit of value, it's a security. It fits into every category. So that's currently where we're at.
When we were speaking of security, we were also talking about the prospectus, right? In financial industry, in stocks and so forth. And if the SEC or the regulatory environment of the, for example, US or any country that is calling it as a security, don't you think that then either the white paper or the smart contracts are going to be considered as a prospectus? So then the government has to look into those. I'm just like a little bit dubious or like maybe confused on this topic. If the US government is proposing it as a security or a commodity, then they have to perhaps realize or understand that there should be a kind of like understanding of that commodity or security behind it for the investors. So what do you guys think in that perspective?
Well, as to a prospectus, white paper wouldn't qualify. It wouldn't meet up to the standards for a prospectus. There's a lot more that goes into it, financial reporting and everything. again, it's not practical. It's not practical to propose that these companies should be regulated the same as an investment company under the SEC, and that tokens should be treated as a security. Not saying there shouldn't be regulation. Regulation is a good thing. It adds credibility. It adds legitimacy. But we need regulation that promotes the industry to grow in a manner that allows it to be what it was essentially meant to be. And currently, that's not what we have. I was actually just at Block Bali, the conference in Bali, Indonesia, and a scary thing there, they got up and they spoke about how the model for regulation is going to be based on the US model, which the US doesn't know what its model for regulation is. So they basically said, well, the US is confused, and we're going to take this model, which nobody really knows what it does and provides no real guidance, and we're going to implement it here. And they offered to provide a flow chart and spreadsheet to anybody who is present so they could take it back to their countries and promote it as what should be done. That's a scary thing. So we need some competent attorneys who can think in terms of legal innovation to help lobby and promote a system that truly benefits everybody involved.
Can I add on the UAE? What's UAE is doing when every time they introduce a new regulatory system? For example, regulatory system in relation to apartment ownership was copied from Australia, because that is believed to be one of the best ones around the world. We're also looking at the various pieces of legislation from Singapore, and trying to use the Singaporean innovation and their experience, and of course translating it, considering the local markets and local conditions, and utilizing those. As Suzanna mentioned, expertise and experience from all over the world is being looked at very critically and evaluated very critically, and then adopted. I don't think we're following, there's any plans to follow the US system, which, you know, I have my personal views on that. But I think till today, there is no a perfect system anywhere in the world which can accommodate ICOs, which can accommodate cryptocurrencies. Switzerland is doing a great job, and I would like to chat to a person who was promoting Switzerland as a jurisdiction. Hey, but I believe that Switzerland now even still trying to impose banking licenses on startups. Whether they moved from that or not, I'd like to learn more. So I'd like to ask my fellow panelists, what should we do? What's the perfect system? Shall we come up with our brand new one from scratch? Shall we take pieces of, you know, from somewhere else? I don't know what the answer is.
There's definitely not a perfect answer yet, I think. But I think, as Ian was alluding to, what we probably need is, just at least conceptually speaking, is some lighter touch type of regulation, which is actually going to enable the industry rather than stifle it, and also weed out some of the bad businesses that are basically given a bad name to the industry. So, you know, it's interesting, if you look just 2 months ago, the SEC, they set up, you know, unit specifically for this business, and just a few days ago they raided this ICO that was, you know, coming to market for $15 million, froze all the assets. It was clearly some sort of Ponzi scheme or something like that. I actually see that as a positive development for the market, because if we start weeding out, you know, the sort of participants of bad faith, then after we can make way for those that are, you know, honest, smooth operators. And if we can then provide some sort of regulatory framework which is, you know, far lighter than what we have for the traditional securities, and which can then give a stamp of approval to those honest operators, then I think that's something that can make the industry flourish. But obviously it's going to be specific to each country, drawing on best practices from other jurisdictions, as you alluded to, and I think people will be looking primarily at places like Switzerland or Singapore. But obviously there are other jurisdictions that have much more of a sort of central planning kind of outlook, which will never probably just politically be able to embrace such a system, unfortunately.
Right. Suzanna?
I just would like to add one point. We are in a Sharia country, which means that we have here not a common law at some point. And as I know, there is already one or two ICOs on Sharia law, which makes a big difference. It's like totally different law, which is not existing anywhere. We cannot implicate it. We cannot tweak it. We have to come up with something. And so regulations, and let's take my example that I know from working with my company. Like we had a long conversation with the legal affairs department of Dubai on how to embrace lawyers actually to get involved with this and start educating each other and start learn about the ICOs and stuff, and actually came up with the ideas for the government on how they would like to work on and what they feel like is good, because they have expertise and they deal on the ground with the people who actually deal with that. So what we realized that on our platform, when we register lawyers, we can actually assess them and give them a proper education and so on, because nobody, like none of us, were actually study ICO in the university. We ourselves as lawyers don't know how to deal with it, the same as the government. So once here we are in a tricky situation, because we are both in a point when we don't know how the general thing will work globally, and the same, we don't know how to implement it with the Sharia law, which is a bit of a different approach to all the fundraise and stuff like that. It's totally different.
Well, you brought up the Sharia law, and I just want to actually point out to this, if you can quickly address the question. I had a discussion with a fellow last night regarding the Bitcoin trading. We know that Bitcoin is like a frenzy. It's crazy. It's going up like 2K in a day. And apparently there's no transaction of Bitcoin in UAE, specifically Dubai. Is it because it's, I know that there is a Sharia law, and is it related to this matter, or it's just like there's no interest in here?
You can buy Bitcoin here.
I know, but no, I mean general interest of people. Do they have knowledge of Bitcoin, or do they just
do,
avoid
of course
it?
they do. It's just the matter of, again, as Irina was mentioning, a lot of big government and semi-government organizations were saying out loud that please do not invest in that, or we are not yet decided how we will protect you afterwards. And so people here do trust government a lot.
Okay.
We do depend on them, because people like myself, I live here for 8 years. I don't have the passports of the UAE, and I know that this is not my end country, but I do accept this government and the attitude and everything. The same mentality probably with this thing.
Okay.
So if the government is saying we are not yet ready for you to invest in something, probably it makes the difference in the way we think. But yes, you can buy the Bitcoins,
quite
and this
interesting.
trend is still there. It's still here.
Thank you. By the way, who owns Bitcoin here? Raise your hand. Apparently there are 25 million Bitcoin in the world. Is it? No?
The max will ever be 21 million.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, then I got the information wrong. But it's going to be, I've heard it's going to be 0.5% of people owning Bitcoin. So we'll see about that, because the price is going up, and
We have the lucky ones in the audience. Let's just cheer them up. Yeah, good job, guys. Yeah, it was just a luck.
It was very
It was a
simple.
hard
But
work
it
to
was
actually
risky.
learn everything that
It
you
was
knew when
risky.
you bought them. So all the education that you've got probably lead you to a decision. Really? Good job.
I'm just not promoting buying a Bitcoin. I was just like raising the point.
But my
here.
question is, Bitcoin surpassed 1300. Was it 13,000?
13.
15,000.
Is it
So
15?
who's buying now? Who's buying now? Or who's like holding? Are you buying? Anybody else is buying? I'm buying. And I recommend everybody to buy I mean,
But,
again,
we're
this
not
is not a
advertising.
No,
this
no,
is not
no,
a
no.
financial.
We're
This
not
is not a financial
advertising.
advice, but
Yeah.
when
Just cut that off from the trip, please.
I think we have to be licensed in order to do that.
No,
It's-
I'm expressing my personal.
As a
I'm
legal
expressing
point of view.
my personal opinion, and when people come and ask, is it too late for me to get in? My question.
never late.
My answer is always: imagine you don't have internet in your apartment. Is it too late to connect to an internet? Of course not.
But I mean, another point for the government to be really keen and interested in legalizing it is because there is so much interest in terms of how they can tax, you know, the
Exactly.
Bitcoin owners, right? I mean, IRS just actually requested CoinDesk to release all the IP information and SIN numbers of the people that are making transactions in on CoinDesk. And CoinDesk is, I think it's also Canadians can do that because that would be the only exchange for making a direct transaction. And Ian, do you want to weigh on that for like very quick?
No, not really. I mean, they're doing
Well,
what
there's
they
no one
do
from
best,
IRS
and
here.
the whole idea behind that is they want to get on and see who's making the big transaction so that they could go after the tax revenue.
Okay,
So the
exactly, yeah.
IRS is just trying to get their cut, and it's Coinbase
Yeah.
was who they went after. And again, you know, that's typically what they do best. Jumping back real quick briefly to what kind of regulation do we need? We need regulation that is going to allow for the industry to expand. So we need something that is going to require disclosures, registration, who's involved, disclosures of what's really going on, full transparency, but also doesn't have the limiting barriers of no marketing, no advertising, of 1 year lockups on sale, all things that dissuade people, especially everyday people who can't lock up $10,000 for a year from entering the market. Because the crux of this and the whole thing, why this is so wonderful, is that everybody can participate. Yeah, so we need to move in that direction.
Perfect. I think we are going to the end of this, but please let us know if you have any questions, because we just started. Yes. Can we get Mike over there? Over there.
Yes, it's Henry from ADX. I was talking earlier about the fact that what is ICO in terms of laws. So that's my question. What is an ICO, or what should it be in terms of asset? Simple question, but I know the answer is not as simple as that.
It's probably impossible to answer, you know, from the UAE perspective. We haven't had a single one. There's a general confusion what it is. And the general public and even the regulators use the words Bitcoin, blockchain, ICO interchangingly, thinking it's the same thing.
One badge.
Yeah, it's all the same. And again, as a lawyer, it is our job to claim or to argue that it is what you want it to be. You're my client, I'll argue that it is that, whereas you're actually doing something else. Of course, I'll try to, you know, counsel you into the right direction, but that's why you hire law firms. And that's the legal community is probably as confused and excited by the speed of changes that are happening in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to echo, I mean, it's completely an open question in so many jurisdictions in the world at the moment, because it's ultimately policy that's being shaped as things evolve. But just to give you a bit of an insight into the kind of work that law firms do at the moment in sort of being part of that policy shaping kind of exercise. I mean, we have companies, very, very large companies involved in sort of the tech sector, established players coming to us and asking us for advice to basically draft up policy papers and to lobby government institutions, policy-making institutions, to make sure that you know, they're going to be part of the game and that their interests are safeguarded as much as possible. And so then defining what an ICO is, what constitutes a security or not in that context, and all those sort of questions are part of that lobbying and policy-making process.
No, I totally agree. That was a good, full answer, I believe.
And generally, the law is something like 10 to 20 years behind the technological advances. 80% of the work that we do is litigation, commercial litigation, criminal litigation. And if you take it in the concept of commercial litigation, if you take it in the concept of contracts, because that's what ICO is, it's really a contract with your customer. It depends what it is that you're selling. Courts in this jurisdiction want an original contract with an original signature and with an original stamp. That is the first step for me to bring in a claim in a court in the UAE. We're talking about ICOs, we're talking about blockchain, smart contracts. That's, you know, a completely different universe. Some jurisdictions, and very advanced jurisdictions like Australia and Singapore and Great Britain, they're still struggling with the concept of cloud and the data protection, you know, when data migrates from one cloud to another. So they haven't even, you know, they haven't addressed that point still, and we already moved on technologically. So that's how bad the that's how behind the legal profession is.
Because we just elect those, you know, regulators, right? If we don't elect them, I think we would be better off regulating it ourselves. Any other questions? Go.
As lawyers, I'm sure the profession is being challenged by technology, right? A lot of the professional services in this world might be replaced by technology. What's your take on smart regulations? So let's say the translation of financial regulations into code. For example, today, capital adequacy reserves for banks are calculated manually. What if a bank systematically would be required to hold, let's say, the minimum capital adequacy ratio? What's your take on the, let's say, the RegTech scene?
So probably coding part is mine. So legal tech in general and how lawyers will be replaced by the AI or whatever. So we are working on that, and probably some certain things that our lawyers are not really excited about is all this document drafting and self-executing documents and going to the courts will be really replaced by the AI, which is good. So I feel like lawyers' profession in the future in ICOs and in blockchain as well will be the part where you speak to the client and you understand what they want in the nature of their business, and then you implement it and code it into the contract, and that contract is actually doing all other job, which is actually don't need to be manual anymore. So is it answer to your question?
Yes, but I think as lawyers I'd also like to ask you another question. Smart contracts today are very promising. However, there's absolutely no way for our, let's say, dispute resolution, right? There's no clear ways of resolve. So it's a self-executing contract. What if one of the conditions no longer applies? How do you see that happening?
So basically there is an oracle, the source which gives you or triggers the execution of the contract. So let's say I've got a recent example for you. So there is a AXA insurance, and they provided the self-executed smart contract for the each time when the flight is delayed, you just download, you just apply for this insurance, and each time when the flight is delayed, you automatically receive the money that the AXA need to pay to you. In this case, the airport is actually the oracle, the physical place where the landing and everything happens with the planes. So once the plane delayed, the information goes from the oracle, from the place where it's secure, the information is securely given to that specific contract. If we take the oracle out, then the whole contract is actually illegal, or it doesn't make any sense anymore. So there have to be an oracle, or the exact place where the information is given for that document to execute.
Right. I guess my question was more for dispute resolution. So
I have more questions to you back. You know, who's responsible for the coding mistakes? Who's responsible for a force majeure? Like, for example, you have a drone which is supposed to drop a package in your backyard, and the package is dropped in the neighbor's backyard on a neighbor's head. Who's responsible for that? Was there wind? Was there coding error? The neighbor has checked all your personal and private information, who is responsible for that illegal data transfer? I have more questions to you on smart contracts, I guess. You coming from the technology side. I have no idea how those are going to be enforced. Again, we're at the stage where original contracts with original signatures in blue pen and a stamp are required in order to start a dispute resolution process. Blockchain, smart contracts, that's a completely different universe for where we are at the moment. What is the situation in the US?
I second that. I don't think that we're nearly even on the field of eliminating lawyers and dispute resolution techniques such as arbitration in courts. That's something we can't even imagine yet because the technology isn't really ready to replace so many various levels of what is in the legal system and what actually is taking place. At this point, you look at something like a title to a car, a promissory note for a bank. Those can be incorporated into a smart contract, and the usefulness of that is I can transfer. If I'm one bank that holds a note on a home that's being mortgaged out, now I can just transfer it, the token, to transfer ownership in exchange for payment from the next bank, instead of having to deal with a paper note that often is lost and misplaced and banks then can't foreclose. So utilities like that, I think, is where we're at with the technology. But as for eliminating lawyers and anything beyond, this represents this item, this document does not get changed. There's no conditions that need to be met. There's no covenants that need to be satisfied. It's simply, this represents ownership. I think that's all we're at right now.
You raised the jurisdiction clause. So what leads you to think that you can't have a jurisdiction clause in a smart contract? Is it just based on your experience?
No jurisdiction.
The same thing.
No, dispute resolution doesn't go into a court.
Well, it's the same thing. Jurisdiction, dispute resolution. What do you mean? So you don't have a jurisdiction clause or a dispute resolution clause? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. But do you not see it happening? That's what I'm asking.
Currently, smart contracts are not enforceable by law.
Okay, so
Actual contract behind it. So I'm asking, when do you think that will be automated as a process?
okay, well, I mean, I think in terms of automation, I mean, I couldn't answer that question, hopefully soon, but I mean, in terms of having a dispute resolution clause, that is absolutely, I mean, it's key. So that's definitely something that, for the purposes of enforceability is key. I mean, I'd say if there's two main ingredients that you want to make sure you have, hopefully in the foreseeable future, is governing law and a jurisdiction clause, otherwise known as dispute resolution clause. Because in some jurisdictions, I mean, if you go for some funky, governing law or dispute resolution forum, you could end up with a smart contract that's just completely unenforceable because they don't have any concept of self-execution, for example. So, I mean, I don't know what your experience has been in terms of the forms of smart contracts that you've seen, but you're definitely right to think that that's an important thing to focus on.
I just add one quick thing. In the U.S., under the Digital Signature Act and Digital Millennium Act, you can argue that a token, that a private key or a public key could represent a signature, okay? So we're in a place then, if you do have a clause within your smart contract that says this contract is an enforceable binding contract that can be enforced in any court within Florida, that's gonna hit you. Then you would be able to enforce that as long as there was consideration exchanged, token was exchanged, property was exchanged, arguing that the keys are actually the signatures, and that it is enforceable in court because the parties agreed to it, or arbitration, whatever you wanted to go for. So it can be done. It just can't be done automatically, automate it yet. You'd still have to bring lawyers in. Yeah.
You can talk after the panel for sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.